Want to welcome everybody in for this next episode of the Downline podcast, where we hope to help men and women faithfully walk with Jesus while pouring their lives into others. My name is Jamie Trussell, privileged to serve as the lead pastor of Redeemer Dripping Springs and on staff with Downline Ministries for 12 total years now. And today we're talking about a very pertinent topic, especially to parents of kids engaged in athletics. So I want to welcome Ross Douma to the episode today, as we're going to talk about family flourishing and competitive athletics. Ross, thanks for joining us.
Jamie, thanks so much for the opportunity to be with you today.
You're going to be a new voice to our Downline community, which I'm really excited about. Some have maybe read your article that posted, I think, on Gospel Coalition a while back. And our friends of Downline, Sarah Zylstra, just did a podcast, an article where you were referenced several times. And so could you give our listeners a little bit of your background, and then we're going to launch into a discussion on competitive athletics and how we navigate that as Christ followers?
No, Jamie, thank you. At the very heart of what I do, I'm an educator and coach, and like many people, learn to try to become a parent on the fly. And some days are better than others, but with the Lord's help, my wife and I, we try to navigate that path as best we can. I began teaching and coaching in 1995. I was in high school and middle school athletics for 14 years, and then moved to higher education in 2009, where I served as a head men's basketball coach at Dordt University, and then for 6 years was the athletic director at Dordt University. Presently, I serve as president of Avail Academy in the Twin Cities. During each of those stops, I coached multiple sports. I also worked in public education and private education, both in rural areas and metropolitan areas. And so through my 30 years in education, I've had a myriad of experiences, and I've learned from a lot of wonderful people along the way, and have been able to really observe and learn really from engaging. And I am just one person, and I have some unique background experiences, and I'm always willing to share and provide insight to try to help families and parents navigate the perils of youth athletics.
Well, that's a great way of putting it. And so, Coach, thanks for joining. I really start here just going. So I'm 41, coming on 42. My wife Shannon and I have 4 kids. They're 10, 8, 6, and 4. And so our 4th and 3rd grader, they're moving their way through the athletic world, and we got great friends in Memphis, great friends back here in Austin. And what I've noticed, even from when I was a kid till right now, it seems to me like the youth sports landscape has completely shifted. When I was growing up in Auburn, we all played City League. If you were good enough, you made the All-Star team. You had a few tournaments that summer, and then you were on to the next sport. The concept of year-round commitments that some of these sports are asking of our families is new territory for me, especially as a parent. How have you seen the landscape shift? Let's just take the last 10, 15, 20 years or so.
I think youth athletics has become very structured, Jamie, in the last 2 decades. I think because it's been so structured, and it's structured because there's a great deal of money to be made from youth athletics. Because of that structure, what we've seen is really a decline in creativity in organic play among young people. Can remember very vividly in the 80s and early 90s when you could drive by parks and playgrounds and basketball courts, and you would see dozens of youngsters playing without adults being present. And there were a lot of lessons to be learned through those experiences. Today, I think that the number of organic activities that creep up within the neighborhoods and within communities in their own regard don't happen nearly as often. And I think that there's missed opportunities for young people in that way. I think too that in the 80s and 90s, youth athletics, AAU, if you will, most of those activities were reserved for your upper echelon players, folks that were skilled, maybe had a bent for playing collegiately. And so today we see that really youth athletics encompasses all children of all abilities. And the reason for that in most cases is because of the fact that there's money to be made. It's an industry. And so I would say those are the 2 biggest changes in the last decade or two in regards to youth athletics, as I see it, is that the structured play has really impeded organic play at the neighborhood level. And we've seen that youth athletics really has enveloped young people, children of all abilities.
What is the what do you think we're missing out on with that? I love how you put that organic play, which I know exactly what you're talking about, right? It was the every weekend it's the neighborhood pickup football game that you're all playing with, or you're rounding up your buddies and you're going to the rec courts. We grew up going to Frank Brown Rec in Auburn, and you're playing against everybody from all over the city. And if you win, you stay. If you lose, you're out. And so, what do you think's being missed out on with that organic play declining?
Yeah, you seldom see young boys and girls with their baseball glove on their handlebars and a bat over their shoulder as they ride from house to house, trying to lure their buddies to go play a baseball or softball game down at the park, or a basketball on their hip as they're walking from home to home, trying to get enough of their friends to play pickup basketball. Those opportunities don't exist as much, and as a result, I think you see children who are a lot more isolated. They remain in their homes more. Obviously, technology plays a role in that as well. But when they do come out to play, it's usually under the auspices of their parents' programming that they've structured for them. It's time to hop in the minivan and we run to this practice. We move to that practice, and the parents are leading those activities versus the children taking the initiative to lead that themselves. And I think there's a lot of life lessons that are lost. Certainly, youth athletics can be a time that's very enriching and impactful if done well, but in many cases it's not. And I think that children who used to organically take it upon themselves, ownership of their own activities, if you will, are missing out on a lot of the life lessons of communication, of responsibility, of problem solving that today adults are doing that for them, unfortunately.
And I am curious your thoughts on this too, but I've noticed the increasing lack of resilience amongst youngsters playing sports. And you just have to solve that for yourself on the playground. If you want to keep playing, you got to push through it.
I think if we work, Jamie, if we break that down to even a micro level with regards to athletics, and you talk about the concept of persistence, because youth athletics today play so many games, losing and being eliminated through bracket play isn't a big deal because teams are guaranteed 3 or 4 games a weekend. A lot of times when youth athletics tournaments began in the 80s and 90s, once you were eliminated, you were out. And you did not play very often either. And so you really valued those opportunities to play and compete, and you were really motivated. Now we have tournaments where games are guaranteed and youngsters are playing 3 or 4 games a weekend, regardless of how they perform. And by the time they get to Saturday or unfortunately Sunday, many of them are tired and they just go through the motions many times. And so that innate desire to compete and to persist really is one more of just survival as opposed to being excellent.
So now you've coached at the highest level, you've been an athletic director, and this is not going to be new to you, but so here are the common, I think, parental concerns as it relates. If, my kid isn't playing competitive baseball at 9, he's not going to make the high school team and not have a chance to play in college. If he's not doing it's I don't want my kid to miss out, which I understand that impulse as a parent. And then you go, I was at a game out here in this area the other night. In the rec league, coach, if I'm just honest, I was going, my kids would be miserable in that league because the kids that were pitching were throwing it outside of the batter's box on every pitch. Like there was no skill level just in the city league team. So what's your just helpful counsel and wisdom to those of us with young kids that really do love sports, but we're also saying, we don't want that to become the idolatry of our family?
I think that's really the crux of the matter, the question that you pose. And I would begin by saying, Jamie, I think parents are very well intentioned and they want to do right by their kids. And I think what you allude to is not being left behind is a fear of many parents. And there are so many opportunities to get involved. It's like going to a restaurant and going down the menu where you have so many options. Youth athletics is very similar to that, and you really don't know where to begin.
Hmm.
And you just oftentimes make decisions that are uneducated, or you feel that there's societal pressure to do so. And so I really feel for parents in that regard, because they have an industry that's hovering above them saying, you need to belong to us, you need to engage with us, or your child will get left behind. And there's countless examples where we see folks who flourish at a very young age, and they go on and they have excellent collegiate and professional careers. But more often than not, that's not the case. Former Major League pitcher Tommy John, he remarked once that if you give me a player at the age of 19 and he's destined to play in the major leagues and pitch in the major leagues, I can still get him there. And so parents embark upon this great race to nowhere at such a young age because they feel that they need to, one, give their child an advantage, that if I start earlier, they're going to have an advantage. And two, other parents are doing it with their own children. And certainly I need to provide the same opportunities, or my child will feel left out, or I'll feel left out as a parent. And they really don't feel like they have another choice but to engage and embark upon that journey. And so there are players who go on and have collegiate and professional opportunities, but most of the time, those folks, because of DNA, they're going to have those opportunities if they start at 14 or if they start at 6. And more often than not, if they start at 6 or 8, we see folks burn out. The age of 12 is peak burnout. That's peak participation. We know that. There's studies to show that. And after the age of 12, we start to see a decline in participation. And so prior to age 12, if I can offer any counsel, it would be to get them in a wide array of activities, avoid specialization, of course, and allow youngsters to explore and to experience so many different activities, both in athletics and otherwise, that can really be fulfilling and really contribute to a flourishing on their part. I think what parents do a lot of times, Jamie, is they coach to what they know. And so mom and dad will inadvertently bend their children towards the activities that they are themselves familiar with. And we did that erroneously with our first child. As a basketball player and coach, we really forced that on our first child, and he did okay. He played high school and college basketball, but I think we robbed him of other passions along the way. Our two other children, they went on to compete in running sports in college, and our youngest golfs in college. Two sports that I have no really familiarity with. And so we learned along the way that this is not my experience. This is their experience, and to give them a wide array of activities that they can really try, experiment with, and ultimately flourish in. It has to be their experience. And my wife and I, we were wrong in how we approached our first child that way. And we're happy to share that story with others in hopes that they don't make the same mistakes.
What were some of those, as you kind of reflect on it, mistakes? I know you mentioned the wide array of opportunities, not specializing, maybe forcing your interest onto a kid that isn't getting able to kind of survey the landscape of involvement. But as you drill down and go, man, if we could rewind it and redo that a little bit, what would you do differently?
Probably, Jamie, starting in 4th and 5th grade with organized activities that span 6 to 10 months out of the year really wasn't necessary. That's something that could have waited much later in the developmental years for our children. Moreover, during that span, most of the time your weekends are compromised. And so as a young family, you don't have Saturdays and Sundays at the park or at the pool or taking on something in the area of fine arts, but rather we were in a gym. We were in a gym every Saturday and Sunday for about 6 to 10 months. And those were wonderful experiences. And we met a lot of great people along the way, but we were going to work every Monday tired. Tired because we didn't give ourselves a day of rest on Sunday like we should have. And because we were just always on the run. And again, we look back fondly on those experiences, but I think that we were specializing too much and we were too streamlined in what we were doing. And we really weren't providing our children with a wide array of experiences like they probably should have had.
In your background of coaching and athletic director, obviously you're doing a lot of recruiting. You've seen, I'm guessing, thousands and thousands of athletes. Did it make a difference for a lot of the kids that you recruited starting at 6, 8, 10, 12? Or does it reach a point, and I think you alluded to this earlier, does it reach a point where a kid kind of either has it or he doesn't, and then you take what God's given him and you can hone it in a certain direction? But just from a coaching and recruiting standpoint, the development of an athlete, what have you seen as kind of like the crucial parts of that?
Yeah, we talked about burnout a few moments ago, and I'll come back to that now. I think it's very applicable with a lot of the college athletes that we saw come into not only our program, but other programs in our league. Folks who specialized beginning at the age of 12 or 14 in a particular sport, by the time they reached the age of 20, 21, they were ready to be done playing. They were ready to move on to the next phase of life. And they were at a point where the sport really was no longer enjoyable for them. What we've seen is youngsters who were 2 or 3 sport athletes who were also involved in other areas of their communities and schools, whether it be leadership, National Honor Society, volunteer. When they came to college, there was a freshness to them. And they were starting at the age of 19 or 20 then to really hone in on a particular sport, but they had banked so many other experiences along the way, and there was still a hunger and there was still a passion, and they were running through the finish line, collegiate athletics, at the age of 22 versus limping home. And that's what we saw, was that there was just a freshness to folks who were multi-sport athletes, who were really engaged in activities beyond athletics. And those folks just seemed to really enjoy their college experience a whole lot more than those who arrived at the age of 18, having specialized since the age of 12 or 14.
You mentioned earlier, thank you for that. That's very helpful. And I've commented on this, I think, from a place of ignorance, just impression, no real research into it. But you mentioned kind of the machine and mechanisms, especially of competitive or select youth athletics, which has become, multiple millions of dollars industry right now, which I think kind of feeds on the parental fear of my kid missing out, my kid not having opportunity. And these leagues aren't structured for family flourishing. They're structured to maximize profit. And so how do you move, maybe if you're in that world, move out or find creative alternatives or disrupt that industry? It seems like it's kind of one of those snowballs rolling downhill. I think a lot of our parents look at it and go, we're in it and we don't want to be, but we have no idea how to stop it.
I think that's, and it really takes a strong parent to move forward boldly in this manner, but to just lay the expectations in front of the youth coach about Sundays, the amount of games that are going to be played. There are a lot of wonderful youth organizations, Jamie, that families can be part of, and to really look at what's best for the family dynamic. And each family is unique and special in its own way, and they have their own set of core values. There are enough youth athletic programs today that you can find one that's pretty amenable and pretty close to what it is that your family really needs. And I think that's where parents really need to do their due diligence. A lot of youth programs, they prey on families in the fact that they're going to talk about helping them obtain a college scholarship or be part of a high school varsity team. But they can deliver those types of messages and not have to follow through on them, because it really comes down to the school coach who has that really in their lap. And so I think parents just need to be very diligent, very thorough in the process, and then lay the expectations before the program or the coach who is going to be with their child, and say, they're not going to play on Sundays if we join this organization, or we're going to play X amount of games if we be part of your organization. And just to have those ground rules established. Parents are still in control of the process. And that's what I think that's probably my prevailing message, is they still can drive their children's experience. And it doesn't need to be run by a program, by an AAU program or a youth sports program. They themselves can drive it. And they might find that there's a number of programs that just don't fit what they're looking for. And that's okay. But to move on, to keep looking, because I go back to what I said earlier. Youth sports can provide a wonderful, enriching and impactful experience for children and for families. But finding the right one is very essential. And that process just takes a great deal of diligence and thoroughness on the part of the parent.
And I would add, again, I'm only 42 and our kids are young, but to the degree that a parent, I think, is insecure in who they are and their image and the value, percentage of value they place on a kid's performance, I do think I'd be remiss not to say that I think that plays a big role in this. It is they win when their kid wins. They win when their kid makes, whatever, fill in the blank, select team or competitive team, and it kind of boosts their image and boost their value. And I'm wondering, from you being more on the back end of this, like, there's some pretty detrimental effects, not just kids quitting sports. I mean, that would be kind of the least of our worries at some point as a parent, but just as far as a kid's spiritual development, value, identity, security, what have you seen on the back end of these life shaping realities for kids that kind of come through this mechanism?
I think, what you're alluding to, and it's a great point, Jamie, is parents need to be willing to stand in gaps and play the long game. And the long game, of course, is eternity. And to really keep that faith focus of their child at the core of what they're trying to do. Unfortunately, the paradigm gets flipped on its head very often, because we look at the here and now with youth sports, and we feel like we need to engage right now and compromise a few weekends here or there, and then it becomes several months, and then ultimately it becomes years. And to really keep the focus being on the long game in terms of their spiritual and personal development. And I think if that is really at the heart of what the family is looking at, you're going to have very well-rounded, flourishing children who use sports as a vehicle for their growth, versus use sports as a means to an end to obtain a college scholarship or a spot on the varsity team. And I think they really need to look at that really through the lens of, how can we use athletics as a means for development versus a means to acquire something that's very transactional? Because you're absolutely right. If we have those missteps along the way, there's a lot of fractured relationships that can transpire between parents and their children. And there's also a lot of well-being that gets damaged along the way as a result, too. And I think that's probably the thing that's so disheartening with youth sports, is that playing time notwithstanding, playing a sport notwithstanding, it's the fractured relationships and the well-being that gets compromised along the way as a result of youth sports that's really detrimental long-term to youngsters. It's sad when we see that the age of 12 is peak for playing youth sports. Sports can have such a profound positive effect on people well into adulthood if done well. And it's just sad to see people walk away because they feel like they're burned out, or they feel like they're letting mom and dad down with their performance, or they're not living up to the expectations that have been placed upon them. So it's a very, very fine line, youth sports, in terms of the rewards that can be encompassed from them versus the damage that can be inflicted as a result of it.
Um, you, again, being at the highest level, coaching, athletic director, how many of these kids are actually going to play in college, coach? I mean, if we would just level set it and we just try to get realistic, I mean, there's a level of elite ability that has to be there that no amount of years in competitive athletics can really overcome. Or would you say, no, Jamie, that's not accurate?
You mentioned earlier, Jamie, about DNA and just having a propensity for being a collegiate athlete. There is a lot to be said for that. That DNA is hard to overcome. If someone has strong DNA and a strong skill set, and certainly a skill set can be developed to a degree, but there's a pretty good chance that you can watch someone at the age of 14 and get a pretty good indication of whether they're going to have the ability to play college athletics. It's not going to be 100% foolproof, but there's just certain innate things that that person has in terms of their physical acumen that's going to just allow for that to take place. Certainly, at the NAI and the Division III level, there's a lot of self-made players. And that can be true of all levels, of course. But by and large, the physical abilities that the Lord has blessed folks with, they really take a significant, uh, they really put a potential collegiate athlete a long ways down the road versus someone who uh, has grittiness to them. Certainly, you champion those traits in athletics, and you do that through the middle school and the high school years. But to become a varsity college athlete, there has to be a degree of abilities that the Lord has blessed you with.
And I guess the challenge there becomes, I mean, most parents kind of think their kid is the one blessed with that. There's some rose-colored glasses on when they look out on the athletic landscape.
And I think that's where it becomes very convoluted, Jamie, is that you have many times a youth coach, an AAU coach telling parents one thing, and the high school coach doesn't want to get sideways with the parents and puts them in a predicament. So we just kind of together amble down this road, and no one is really going to be very forthright and honest with a 16 or 17-year-old about their ability to play. And you get to a point where heading into their senior year, there's either scholarships or there's not. And when there's no scholarships, um, all parties kind of put their hands out and say, "Well, it's really not my fault. No, it's really not my fault." And unfortunately, it's the family and the youngster who's kind of left in the middle to try to figure out what's next. And that's too bad. But it's really the outcome many times with the machine that is youth athletics today.
We mentioned something earlier, or you did, about burnout kind of peaking at 12, and I'm remiss because I'm forgetting the exact team, but there was a team, it may have been a Texas team, some years back that won the Little League World Series, and not a single player on that team even wound up playing high school baseball.
I think there was a study done, Jamie, on the number of youngsters who played in the Little League World Series and how many of them went on to play collegiately and how many went on to play professionally. It's a very, very nominal number. Youngsters who are really good at the age of 10, 12, and 14 because of the fact that they mature very early. Those are the ones that I'm very concerned about because there had been a lot of expectations heaped upon them in terms of having the ability to be outstanding high school players than collegiate athletes, and they have a lot of expectations placed upon them, and in many cases, they don't have safety nets to help them deal with the fact that they've peaked at the age of 12 and 13, and who's there to help them navigate the next steps when they become less successful each passing year throughout high school.
Hmm. So there's one, and I'll let you go here in a minute. I know I promised you 30 minutes, but I always go over, and the Lord forgives me.
This is a lot of fun. You can keep talking.
Okay, so there is one category I haven't really mentioned is that the parent that said, well, look, we would be fine with not doing this, but my kid loves it so much. They want to do it. They're begging us to do it. And so it's not the parent forcing it. It's not it's this kind of hands thrown up. our kid just really loves it and we don't want to tell them no type of thing. How do you speak into that particular scenario?
I think, Jamie, there's a lot of youth athletic programs that have very modified schedules, especially for those at the age of 10 and 12. And those are nice entry level opportunities for families to really embark upon youth sports. And so I think in a very modified level, there's ways to really enter into competitive youth athletics. I would also say um, you're the parent and you have to play the long game, and you know what's best for your child, and what's best for them at the age of 12 may not be a full-fledged youth athletic schedule. And you want that passion for sure, but you really want that passion to be there at 18 as well. And so to incrementally maneuver through that really is probably the best guidance that I can offer. That's wonderful that they have that passion and that desire to play, and you want that. But we also want to see that continue and persist over a long period of time. And so not to exhaust that at the age of 10, 12, and 14 is something that a parent has to take into account, and not to become enamored with the fact that their child loves to play and has a real strength in that particular area, but to just casually groom that and to allow that to mature and manifest itself on its own, I think is really what parents would be advised to do.
Well, and pastorally, I look out and one of my big concerns is, everything we do communicates something of priority and value. And when you're not in church for half the year, that is telling our kids something about value and priority. Or if we even make it to church, but we got to bust out as quickly as possible because we got to get across town. We got to do it like it has the feel of we better check this box real quick so that we can go off and play in our baseball tournament, right? Or whatever it is. And there's going to have to be some courage where parents say, not us, not anymore.
The parents are in charge of their children's schedule in terms of what Sundays look like until they're not, right? Until they leave their home, in many cases, sending them off to college. The parents are the ones that need to take the onus and say, what does Saturday, what does especially Sunday look like for my family? And you're exactly right. The messaging will be both direct and indirect in terms of what that Sunday schedule looks like. And there may be ample opportunities to fit a basketball or a baseball game in on Sunday for the family. But how they approach Sunday and the message that they convey, whether directly or indirectly, is going to have huge ramifications on the development of that child and the development of other children in that family. And so you're exactly right. Where does God exist on Sunday within the framework of youth sports and the family? And that really is, I think, where families need to really sit down and ascertain what that looks like. Youth sports can have a wonderful effect on families, or it can absolutely gobble them up and make them very disposable. And so that Sunday question needs to be asked by families, and that needs to be vetted out well and discussed amongst them, because the messages that the children receive are going to be loud and clear.
I'm going to let you get out of here on this, kind of give you open floor, open mic to give your own exhortations to parents, especially in my life stage, maybe those with kids that are a little bit older. Our oldest is 10. But if your kid doesn't play competitive sports, if they don't play on a varsity team, if they don't get a college scholarship, it's kind of, we need to answer the so what? Like, how would you give, I think parents want to hear from someone like you who's been at the highest level, hey, your kid's not going to be left behind. It's actually isn't the best pathway forward. Here's some wisdom things on what to do. If I just kind of give you open, mic here to give us your own counsel and exhortations, what would you say?
Jamie, I would say that the years are very fleeting, and when you're in it, you think that they creep along very slowly. But for someone who's had all three children now graduate high school and are out of the home. Those years go by very, very quickly. And to sell out to the machine that is youth sports robs families of opportunities. Youth sports can play a very significant role in the development of children, and it can be very much a part of the fabric and schedule and routines and rhythms of families. But parents need to control it, and they can't allow those schedules to dictate their own home life. And so to be in charge and to take ownership of the schedule that youth sports likes to demand on families, I think is really essential. And beyond that, a child's ability to play sports is very minuscule comparatively to the big picture that the Lord places in front of us. The Lord asks us to raise our children to respect one another, but more importantly, to grow each and every day and to be more like Jesus. And if youth sports can help accomplish that, great. But if it detracts from that, then we need to move away from that. And being an athlete is just something that's very ancillary and very peripheral. And your ability to parent well is not to be caught up in the identity of how well your child performs on the field or on the court. This great race to nowhere that is youth athletics many times can swallow families up. And I would just really encourage parents to stay the course, to take ownership day by day of their children's activities, and to understand that it's very fleeting, and to really, really cherish those years with their children, because they do go by very quickly.
Well, Coach, thanks so much for your time. I know you're busy, and adding your voice to the Downline community has been a ton of fun, and I think really helpful and really impactful. I did, as you were talking, have one more. Is there room, or do you think a necessity for Christian, men and women to step in and try to disrupt this industry with a more value-driven alternative? Or do you think there are enough options out there right now we can kind of survey the menu and find something?
I think your question's a great one, Jamie. I think Christians as a whole need to step into many gaps and spaces within culture. And the sports culture today needs men and women who are bold and who are visionary and who want to impact young people well. And so we're seeing the rise of more and more youth organizations that are ardently Christian and unashamedly Christian. And those folks who feel compelled to lead in this way, they should be commended. And parents should know that those organizations exist. And the more that we can formulate those organizations to help families navigate the perils of youth athletics, the better. But at Dordt University, we were very much about engaging culture through athletics, and we really believe that it was our calling to really prove and show that there's a better and a different way to do athletics than what society really deemed as appropriate. Mm. And so for Christians to be counterculture and to fight against the idols of athletics, I think is paramount. And I think we've stood idly by as Christians in many regards for too long, and we just need to engage. Not in an admonishing way, not in an aggressive, agitating way, but to just boldly and confidently step into the sports culture and say, we're going to take this over for our children, and we're going to provide wonderful experiences that are Christ-centered, because we know that eternity is at stake, and it doesn't need to be the way that society has told us that it should.
Well, Coach Douma, thanks again. I really enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll connect again down the road.
Really appreciate your time. Thanks so much, Jamie, for the opportunity. And more importantly, thank you for what you're doing to shape the kingdom.
Absolutely.